My name is Emily Dawson, and I was 29 when my sister reminded me just how small she thought I was. I still remember that night in my little Boston apartment. String lights draped across the living room, balloons deflating before the party even started, and the weight in my chest growing heavier with every twist of tape I pressed against the wall. It wasn't the decorations making my hands shake. It was the knowledge that Victoria was coming. My older sister, Victoria Dawson, had a talent for two things: closing million-dollar deals and tearing me down in front of whoever would listen. She had the penthouse view in New York, the designer heels, the husband in a tailored suit who never missed a chance to sneer at me when she wasn't looking. Me? I had a modest one-bedroom apartment on the quieter side of Boston, a steady job no one found glamorous, and a life I kept simple because that's how Dad raised me, to value heart over spotlight. But Victoria never let me forget how she measured me. Less than. I can still feel the echo of her last words when we'd been face to face. "You'll never measure up." It was cruel, dismissive, but it was nothing new. She'd been sharpening that blade since childhood. I used to tell myself it didn't matter, that her arrogance was her armor, not my burden. But something about this time felt different. The air around me felt charged, like the city before a thunderstorm. The truth? I wasn't as weak as she thought. For years, I'd been living a double life: quiet Emily on the outside, the invisible investor on the inside. While Victoria paraded her brilliance around New York, posting smug updates on LinkedIn about million-dollar clients and galas under crystal chandeliers, I was the one quietly funneling money into her struggling firm, saving it from collapse during market dips that would have destroyed her reputation. Not for her ego, but for the dozens of employees who didn't deserve to lose their jobs. She had no idea. To her, I was just the little sister with the boring desk job. I told myself I could bear it, so long as Dad stayed proud of me, so long as I lived by the values our mother, Linda, instilled before she passed. But deep down, I knew Victoria's cruelty was escalating, and Dad's birthday dinner was the perfect stage for her to put me back in my place. I didn't know then just how literal she meant that. A few weeks earlier, I'd opened LinkedIn for the first time in months, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug at my kitchen table. I never checked Victoria's profile. It was nothing but a highlight reel of her so-called brilliance. But curiosity betrayed me. There she was, smiling in her downtown office, captioned, "Another million-dollar deal closed. Not everyone can keep up, especially those stuck in dead-end office jobs." It wasn't subtle. It was a jab with my name on it. Scrolling further, I found another gem from the month before. Victoria in a glittering dress at some Manhattan gala, her husband Andrew grinning smugly beside her. "Surrounded by winners, not wannabes who think pushing papers is a career." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. My hands clenched. She didn't even try to hide her contempt anymore. And the comments stung worse. "Wow, Victoria, you're such an inspiration. Your sister must be proud." Her reply? "Emily's too busy with her little desk job to notice." I slammed my laptop shut, my pulse thundering in my ears. If only they knew. If only they saw the receipts, the wire transfers, the silent rescues. Her firm, her so-called empire, would have burned to the ground 3 times over without me. And still, she mocked me in public like I was nothing. Part of me wanted to reply, to drop the truth like a bomb in the middle of her carefully curated feed. To watch her smile crumble under the weight of her own arrogance. But I didn't. That's never been me. My pride has always been quiet, my strength silent. I'd rather build something real than chase applause. But even as I told myself that, something inside me shifted. Because here's what Victoria never understood. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes silence is patience. Sometimes silence is just waiting for the right moment to strike back. As Dad's birthday drew closer, I threw myself into planning. Streamers, balloons, his favorite meal, meatloaf with extra ketchup glaze, just like Mom used to make. I wanted the day to be about him, not Victoria's theatrics. I taped decorations across the living room walls of his old house in the Boston suburbs, humming the lullaby Mom used to sing when she tucked us in. For a moment, I felt almost peaceful. But even as I hung the happy birthday banner, my phone buzzed with a new notification. Another LinkedIn post from Victoria. Another photo of champagne glasses raised high. Another caption that cut straight through me. Some of us rise, some of us settle. Guess which one my sister chose? I sank into a chair, the banner dangling in my hand. My jaw tightened. Dad didn't see these posts. He still believed Victoria's cruelty was just harmless sibling rivalry. But I knew better. She was laying the groundwork for something bigger, for the humiliation she'd planned for me in front of everyone we loved. And I was right. At Dad's birthday dinner, she didn't just mock me. She dragged me down, pointed, and spat out words I'll never forget. "Your place is on the floor." The laughter still echoes when I close my eyes. But here's what Victoria never saw coming. I was done being her shadow. I was done carrying her empire in silence. And by the time I was finished, she would never look at me the same way again. If this story already pulls you in, subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive, and trust me, you won't want to miss how this one ends. Now, let me ask you this. If your own sister humiliated you at a family dinner, would you stay silent like I did that night, or would you fight back in the moment? Comment below. I'd love to hear your take. It started like a whisper, but soon it became a roar I couldn't ignore. Victoria wasn't just mocking me in private anymore. She'd taken our sibling war online. And the battlefield she chose? LinkedIn. A place where people celebrated promotions and congratulated colleagues on achievements. But for my sister, it was just another stage to show off and tear me down. One Saturday morning, I sat in my Boston apartment with the blinds half drawn, sipping my usual black coffee. My laptop sat open on the kitchen table, glowing with updates from work. I should have been reviewing client reports, but a notification flashed. Victoria Dawson has shared a post. Against my better judgment, I clicked. There she was, immaculate in her sharp blazer, a glass-walled office in Manhattan behind her, the city lights glittering like her personal kingdom. The caption beneath the photo made my stomach drop. Another $1 million deal closed. Not everyone can keep up, especially those stuck in dead-end office jobs. My chest tightened. She didn't have to say my name. She never did. Everyone in her network knew she had one sister, and every word was designed to remind me where she thought I belonged. At the bottom. I scrolled further, my hands trembling around the coffee mug. A post from last month showed Victoria and Andrew at a black tie gala in New York, her hand perfectly placed on his arm as they smiled for the cameras. The caption read, "Surrounded by winners, not wannabes who think pushing papers is a career." I set the mug down, coffee sloshing onto the table. My throat burned. Scrolling through the comments only made it worse. Our neighbor from Dad's Boston suburb, Margaret, had written, "Victoria, you're killing it. Your sister must be so proud of you." And Victoria's reply? "Emily's too busy with her little desk job to notice." The words blurred in front of me. I wanted to scream, to hit reply and tell them the truth. That while Victoria was busy playing Queen of New York, I was the one who'd saved her so-called empire, quietly investing through anonymous channels when the markets turned against her. She had no idea the very foundation of her company stood on money I had poured in. Without me, her employees would have been jobless, her name forgotten, her deals a pile of ashes. But instead of gratitude, she gave me contempt. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the cracked paint on my kitchen ceiling. For years, I told myself her cruelty was just noise, something to rise above. But seeing it written down for the world to applaud, it stung in a way I couldn't shake. The next week, Dad insisted we meet for dinner at a quiet restaurant in downtown Boston. "Just the family," he'd said over the phone. I agreed, praying it might be a chance to patch things up. But I should have known better. The place was warm, with soft jazz floating through the air and candlelight flickering across polished tables. Dad smiled as he slid into his chair, his weathered hands clasping mine. "I'm glad we're all here," he said. His eyes still carried that glimmer of hope, like maybe one day his daughters would find peace. Victoria swept in late, as always, Andrew trailing behind her with his smug grin. Her perfume announced her before her voice did. She sat across from me, her dress shimmering under the low light, and ordered the most expensive wine on the menu without even glancing at the prices. The first half hour went smoothly enough. Dad tried to stir up nostalgia, laughing about summers at the Cape and how Mom used to make us wear matching dresses for Easter. For a moment, I almost believed things could be civil, but Victoria didn't come to reminisce. She leaned forward, swirling her glass of wine, and fixed me with that same cutting smile I'd seen on LinkedIn. "So, Emily," she said, her voice slicing through the music, "still slaving away at that little desk job of yours?" The table went silent. Dad shifted uncomfortably, his fork clinking against the plate. Andrew chuckled under his breath, enjoying the show. My face burned hot, but I forced a smile. "It's fine," I said softly. Victoria tilted her head back and laughed, a sharp, cold sound that turned heads at nearby tables. "Fine." "Oh, honey, you're such a failure compared to me. I close million-dollar deals while you're… What? Filing papers?" I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. Every word cut deeper, not because I believed her, but because Dad was right there, listening. His shoulders sagged, his pride wounded on my behalf. I wanted to tell her the truth, that without me, her deals would have collapsed, her company swallowed whole by the last market crash. But instead, I swallowed the words. She wasn't finished. "You know, some people are just meant for small lives," she said loudly, enough for the next table to hear. She leaned back in her chair, flashing her diamond ring. "I mean, look at me. I'm carrying this family's name forward." Dad opened his mouth to change the subject, but she cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Oh, Dad, let's not bore everyone with plumbing stories," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I saw the flicker of pain in his eyes, and it nearly broke me. Then the bill arrived, $400, thanks to Victoria's extravagant orders of wine and steak. Without hesitation, she slid it across the table toward Dad, her smirk widening. "You got this, right? I'd pay, but Andrew and I are saving for our new condo." Andrew laughed, nodding. My blood boiled. Dad pulled out his wallet with trembling hands, his voice strained but calm. "I'll cover it." Victoria leaned back, satisfied, as though humiliating both of us was her birthright. Then she leaned across the table, her words sharp and private, meant only for me. "You should thank me for showing you what real success looks like." I lifted my eyes to hers, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I see it clearly," I whispered. She smirked, believing she'd won. But as I watched Dad's shoulders slump and her husband gloat, something inside me hardened. For years, I had let her dictate the story. For years, I had propped her up while she dragged me down. But this wasn't sibling rivalry anymore. It was cruelty. And the next time she crossed a line, I promised myself I wouldn't stay silent. That dinner was supposed to bring us together. Instead, it set the stage for the moment I would finally break my silence. And that moment was coming sooner than I realized. The days leading up to Dad's birthday felt heavier than any I could remember. His big day was supposed to be about joy, about family and celebration, about honoring the man who held us together after Mom passed. But in the back of my mind, I could feel a storm gathering, and her name was Victoria. I busied myself in my small Boston apartment with streamers, balloons, and grocery lists. Dad loved simple things: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, chocolate cake with homemade frosting. I wanted every detail perfect. But as I taped a string of lights across the wall, the sound of my doorbell tore through the silence. I froze. Hardly anyone ever showed up unannounced. When I opened the door, there she was, Victoria Dawson, standing tall in her designer coat, her stiletto heels clicking against the hallway floor, her perfume overwhelming my tiny space. Andrew was nowhere in sight. This was her mission alone. "Emily, we need to talk," she snapped, brushing past me into the living room as if she owned the place. I shut the door, my stomach twisting. "Couldn't this wait until Dad's party?" She spun around, her eyes cold and sharp. "That's exactly what this is about." Her tone was clipped, venom disguised as concern. She paced across my small living room, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "You need to understand something. Dad's birthday is important. People will be there. Family, neighbors, friends. You cannot show up and embarrass us." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Embarrass us? Victoria, I'm the one organizing everything." "I've been planning this party for weeks," she smirked, her lipstick catching the light. "And that's exactly what I'm afraid of. Your sad little life, your cheap clothes, your pathetic job, you think that's what Dad deserves to show off on his birthday? I won't let you ruin this." Her words hit like a slap. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep calm. "I'm not competing with you. I just want Dad to have a good day." Her laugh was sharp, hollow. "Compete? Don't flatter yourself. You're not even in my league." She jabbed her manicured finger at me. "But hear me now. If you show up to that party looking like the nobody you are, you won't just embarrass yourself. You'll embarrass all of us. So either change your ways or don't bother showing up." For a moment, silence filled the room. I could hear the faint buzz of the fridge, the hum of the city outside my window. Her words twisted inside me like a knife. "Not invited to Dad's birthday," I whispered, my voice trembling but steady. She leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "That's right. And if you think Dad will defend you over me, think again. He knows who carries this family's name. It's not you." Memories flooded me. Christmas mornings where she mocked my handmade gifts, summers when she laughed at my plain clothes, dinners where she cut me down while Dad sat quiet to keep the peace. But this was worse. This wasn't rivalry. It was a line drawn in the sand. I lifted my chin, forcing my voice not to break. "I'm not the one embarrassing anyone, Victoria." She scoffed, tossing her hair back. "Keep telling yourself that." With one final glare, she turned on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. The room felt colder in her absence. I stood staring at the string of birthday lights dangling from my hands, my chest tight. She thought she could erase me, strip me from Dad's day like I didn't matter. But she was wrong. I sank into the couch, my pulse still racing. For years, I'd protected her without her knowing, pouring money into her firm through Michael Reed, my business partner, saving her reputation when the market threatened to collapse her empire. I never asked for credit. I never revealed the truth. I told myself it was for her employees, for Dad's pride, for family. But now she was threatening to cut me out entirely. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to Michael's number. My thumb hovered over the call button, the thought burning in my mind. Maybe it's time to rethink this silent support. But I stopped short. Not yet. Not before Dad's birthday. I wouldn't let her ruin his day, no matter how cruel she became. The next evening, I drove to Dad's old house in the suburbs of Boston. The familiar creak of the porch steps, the smell of meatloaf baking in the oven, it was like stepping back into childhood. Dad greeted me at the door, his weathered face lighting up with a smile. "You're doing too much, Emily," he said gently as I unpacked bags of streamers, candles, and balloons. "It's your day, Dad," I replied, forcing cheer into my voice. "I want it to be perfect." But my hands trembled as I tied the balloons. He noticed. He always noticed. "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" he asked, lowering himself into a chair, his hands folding over one another. I nodded. "She threatened to keep me away from your birthday." His brows furrowed, his eyes clouded with pain. "Victoria's always been competitive. Even as a little girl, she needed to win. But you're my rock, Emily. Don't let her dim your light." His words sank deep into me, pulling at memories of Mom, Linda, who used to say the same thing. "Your kindness is your strength," she'd whisper as she brushed my hair at night. If she were alive now, she'd be horrified by the poison between us. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "I just want this to be about you, Dad." "Not her." He smiled faintly, placing a calloused hand on mine. "Then make it about me. Don't let her take that from you." For a moment, the ache in my chest eased. But as I hung the happy birthday banner across the living room, my mind replayed Victoria's words. "Don't bother showing up." I knew then that the storm wasn't over. She was planning something. And when it came, I would have to decide, stay silent or finally fight back. The morning of Dad's birthday broke cold and clear over Boston. The air carried that crisp bite that always came just before winter settled in. And as I drove out to his suburban home with the trunk full of decorations, my chest swirled with both excitement and dread. Inside, the house smelled of roasted meatloaf and chocolate cake. Streamers fluttered gently in the draft, balloons bobbed in the corners, and neighbors from down the street had already begun to gather in the living room. Dad looked happy, radiant even. His laugh filled the air as he swapped stories with Margaret, our longtime neighbor, and a few of his old co-workers. I tried to focus on him, on the man who'd raised me to value humility and hard work. But even as I laid out plates and straightened the happy birthday banner, my stomach twisted with one thought. When will she arrive? And then, as if the thought summoned her, the front door opened. Victoria swept in, a storm wrapped in silk. Her heels struck the hardwood like a drumbeat, and Andrew Miller followed just behind her, his smirk already in place as if he'd been rehearsing it all the way from New York. Her coat, sleek and expensive, shimmered under the soft light as though she'd stepped out of a magazine spread rather than her car. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on me. That smirk spread across her face like a dagger slowly unsheathed. "Nice little party, Emily," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you spend all week on this?" Conversations faltered. Heads turned. I forced a smile, adjusting the centerpiece on the table. "Dad deserves the best." She clicked closer, the air between us tightening. "Oh, let's not pretend this is anything special," she announced loudly enough for everyone in the living room to hear. "Streamers and meatloaf? Really?" Laughter bubbled up from Andrew's throat, sharp and cruel. I clenched my jaw, refusing to give her the reaction she wanted. Dad, bless him, tried to intervene. He raised his glass, his voice warm. "Let's toast. To family, to memories, and to another year together." But Victoria cut him off. "Oh, Dad, let's not bore everyone with small talk. Tonight's supposed to be a celebration, not whatever this is." She gestured around the room, her perfectly manicured nails glinting under the lights. I felt the sting of her words, not for me, but for him. His shoulders dipped, the corners of his smile faltering, though he masked it with a sip of wine. My chest tightened. She wasn't just mocking me anymore. She was belittling him, too. We sat for dinner, the table heavy with food and chatter that felt strained, forced. Guests tried to laugh over old stories, but Victoria dominated every pause, her voice carrying over everyone else. She recounted another big deal she had closed, her husband chiming in about their plans for a new Manhattan condo. I stayed quiet, focusing on keeping Dad comfortable. But I should have known she wouldn't let me slip by unnoticed. Halfway through dinner, Victoria rose abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a shriek that silenced the room. She held her wine glass like a scepter, her eyes scanning the table before landing on me. "You know, Emily," she began, her voice sharp enough to cut the air, "you don't belong at this table." Gasps rippled through the guests. My fork froze midair, my hand trembling. Before I could speak, she stepped forward, grabbed the back of my chair and yanked. The world tilted. I stumbled, falling hard to the floor, my hand scraping the wood. And then came the words that would sear into me forever. "Your place is on the floor," she spat, her voice venomous, her finger pointing down at me like a judge delivering a sentence. The room erupted. Some guests laughed nervously, thinking it was some cruel joke. Andrew laughed the loudest, slapping his knee like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. Others fell into awkward silence, their eyes darting between me and Victoria, unsure of what to do. I pushed myself up slowly, brushing off my dress. My face burned, not just from humiliation, but from the betrayal of hearing laughter in a room that should have been safe. Dad's face went pale, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "Victoria, that's enough," he said, his voice shaking. But she only smirked, her eyes daring me to fight back. I met her gaze, and though my voice was quiet, it carried the weight of every insult, every sneer, every cut she had delivered through the years. "I understand," I whispered. The laughter faltered. The room grew tense, uncertain. Victoria tilted her head, confused for a moment, thinking she had won. But she didn't see the fire sparking inside me. She didn't know that her cruelty had just pushed me past the edge. I grabbed my purse, straightened my back, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, cutting off the whispers, the stares, the laughter. Outside, the cold Boston air wrapped around me like a shroud. My hands shook, my chest burned, but my steps were steady. I leaned against the porch railing, staring out at the quiet street, and I made myself a promise. This was the last time Victoria Dawson would humiliate me without consequence. The night of Dad's birthday burned into my memory like a scar. Even after I left the house, the sound of their laughter echoed in my ears. Victoria's voice sharp and triumphant, Andrew's smug chuckle louder than anyone else's. I sat in my car outside, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The glow of the house spilled out through the windows, the hum of celebration still alive inside. But to me, it felt like exile. For years, I had let Victoria treat me like background noise. For years, I swallowed her insults, telling myself it was better to keep the peace. But when she pulled me to the floor in front of Dad, our neighbors, our friends, that was different. That was final. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling, and typed a single message to Michael Reed, my longtime business partner, the man who knew the truth of what I'd been doing for years. "Start the process. We're pulling our investments from Victoria's firm." I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the send button. Then I hit it. The rush of relief was instant, like stepping out of a suffocating room into cold night air. Victoria thought I was powerless. She thought my place was on the floor. But the truth? I had been holding her entire empire on my shoulders, and the moment I stopped, everything she had built would crumble. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of calls and texts. Dad, neighbors, even Andrew's number flashing on my screen. I ignored them all. Instead, I walked into Michael's office in downtown Boston, a sleek but modest space compared to the glitz of Victoria's Manhattan headquarters. Michael looked up from his desk, concern etched across his face. "I got your message," he said. "You're sure about this?" I nodded, sliding into the chair across from him. "She humiliated me in front of everyone. She's crossed every line. I've given her chance after chance, and she's never once respected me." Michael leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Emily, you've funneled nearly $500,000 into her firm over the years. Without your support, she won't survive the next quarter. Are you ready for that?" I swallowed hard. A part of me ached for the employees at her firm, the ones I'd quietly saved time and again. But then I remembered Dad's pale face at the table, the way his hands had gripped the wood when Victoria yanked me to the floor. I remembered her venom, her laughter. "I'm ready," I said firmly. "She wanted me on the floor. Let's see how she handles falling herself." Michael studied me for a long moment before nodding. "All right. I'll start the withdrawal process today." That afternoon, I visited Dad. He sat on the porch of his suburban home, the autumn air carrying the faint scent of leaves. He looked tired, older than he had the day before. "Emily," he said softly as I sat beside him. "I'm sorry. I should have stopped her sooner." I shook my head, forcing a small smile. "It's not your fault, Dad." "She's made her choices." He sighed, staring off at the trees. "She's always been like this. Competitive, cruel sometimes. But I thought maybe one day she'd grow out of it." His words cut deeper than Victoria's ever had, because beneath them, I heard the weight of a father torn between two daughters. I reached for his hand. "You've done enough, Dad. You raised me to stand on my own. And that's what I'm doing now." He squeezed my hand back, his eyes misty. "Your mother would be proud of you." Her name, Linda, hung in the air like a blessing. I closed my eyes, hearing her voice in my memory. "Kindness is your strength, but strength doesn't mean weakness, Emily." For the first time in years, I believed her. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, the first cracks appeared in Victoria's firm. Market whispers spread of unpaid invoices, delayed payments, nervous clients. Her LinkedIn posts, once full of smug triumphs, grew erratic, thinly veiled boasts masking desperation. I watched quietly from Boston, sipping coffee in my apartment as she spiraled, and though part of me felt guilty for the employees, I reminded myself I had done everything I could for years. Victoria's arrogance had brought her here. Then, one evening, Michael called me. His voice carried both gravity and satisfaction. "It's happening," he said. "Her firm is on the brink. Without our capital, she can't sustain the debt. Clients are pulling out. The house of cards is falling." I leaned against the counter, my heart pounding. This was it. The silent support I'd given her was gone. The truth of her fragility was finally catching up. Michael's voice softened. "Emily, you don't have to hide anymore. You're stronger than she ever gave you credit for." I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. He was right. I had been hiding, not just from Victoria, but from myself. All these years, I'd let her dictate my worth. But now I was writing my own story. But Victoria wasn't about to go quietly. 3 days later, my phone rang again. This time it was Dad. His voice was shaky, urgent. "Emily," he said. "She's here. At my house. She's crying. She says she needs to talk to you." My pulse quickened. The image of her face at the birthday dinner flashed through my mind, the smug grin, the words that cut me down. Now she wanted to talk. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear. I felt power, and I was ready to face her. If this story touches you, drop a number 1 in the comments. Every one reminds us that these stories matter, and it gives us the motivation to keep sharing them with you. The knock on my door came late in the evening, just as the Boston skyline outside my apartment glowed in shades of gold and indigo. I knew who it was before I even checked the peephole. "Victoria." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lock. Just 2 weeks earlier, she had pulled me to the floor in front of our father, our neighbors, our friends, laughing as if humiliating me was a party game. Now she stood on the other side of my door, not triumphant, but broken. When I finally opened it, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, picture-perfect sister who had strutted through life with a champagne glass in one hand and a cruel word on her lips. Instead, her hair was disheveled, her eyes red from crying, her designer coat hanging loosely off her shoulders. "Emily," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, can we talk?" I stepped aside, motioning her in, not out of kindness, but out of control. For the first time in years, she needed me more than I needed her. She sank onto my couch, clutching her handbag like it was the last piece of dignity she had left. Andrew wasn't with her. For someone who'd always paraded her husband as proof of her status, his absence spoke volumes. She looked up at me, tears brimming. "It's all falling apart," she said, her words tumbling out. "Clients are leaving, employees are quitting, and the board, they're turning on me. I don't know what to do." I crossed my arms, standing tall. "Maybe now you understand what it feels like to be powerless." Her lips trembled. "I never meant for things to get this bad. Emily, I need your help." The audacity of her words nearly made me laugh. Help. That was what I'd given her for years. Quietly, anonymously, sacrificing my own financial stability to keep her empire afloat. And how had she repaid me? By calling me a failure, by pushing me to the floor in front of Dad. "You don't need my help, Victoria," I said coldly. "You need humility." She flinched like I had slapped her. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy with all the years of bitterness between us. Then she whispered, "I didn't know about what you did. Michael told me. He said you were the reason my firm survived the last crash." Her words fell into the space between us like broken glass. Finally, the truth had pierced her pride. I sat down across from her, steadying my voice. "That's right. Every time you bragged about outsmarting the market, it was me. Every $1 million deal you flaunted, it wouldn't have existed without the money I funneled in to save your employees." Her eyes widened, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because it was never about you," I said firmly. "It was about Dad, about protecting the people who worked for you. I thought, maybe one day you'd grow up and see beyond yourself. But you never did." She broke down then, sobs racking her frame. For years, she had been the strong one, the star, the untouchable Dawson sister. Now she was just a woman who had built her castle on sand, watching it sink. "Emily, I'm sorry," she choked out. "I was cruel. I was jealous. I wanted to be the one Dad was proud of, and every time he looked at you, I hated it. I thought if I pushed you down, I'd rise higher. But now..." She buried her face in her hands. "Now I have nothing." Her confession cut deeper than I expected. Jealousy. That had been the root of her venom all along. But her tears didn't erase the scars she had left on me. I stood, moving toward the window, staring out at the city lights. "You say you have nothing, but that's not true. You still have a choice. You can take responsibility. You can face the consequences of your arrogance. Or you can keep pretending and watch everything burn." Behind me, her sobs quieted. "Emily, I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose Dad. Please, just give me another chance." I turned to face her, my heart heavy. I saw the girl she used to be, the one Mom had loved so fiercely before pride twisted her into someone unrecognizable. But I also saw the woman who had humiliated me, who had mocked me in front of Dad and strangers, who had crushed my dignity over and over. "Another chance?" I repeated, my voice steady. "Do you remember what you said at the dinner table? Your place is on the floor." Her face crumpled, shame flooding her features. I stepped closer, my words sharp but calm. "Look down, Victoria. That's where you wanted me. But I'm not there anymore. I will never be there again." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, she stood, wiping her eyes, her shoulders slumped. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll go." She walked to the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood, each step weaker than the last. When she paused with her hand on the knob, she looked back at me, her eyes hollow. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "I really am sorry." Then she left. I stood in the quiet of my apartment, my chest rising and falling with the weight of what had just happened. For years I had dreamed of this moment, of Victoria finally admitting the truth, of her pride cracking open. But the reality wasn't triumph, it was clarity. I couldn't change her. I couldn't erase the years of pain. But I could choose myself. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Boston mornings had a way of making everything feel sharper, the air brisk, the skyline bold against the Atlantic. A week after Victoria showed up at my door in tears, I sipped coffee by my apartment window, watching the city stir awake. For once, I felt calm, but calm didn't mean quiet. The fallout from her empire's collapse had already begun to ripple. News spread fast. One headline after another flashed across my phone. Dawson Miller firm under fire after mass exodus of clients. Sources claim financial mismanagement at Victoria Dawson's company. Anonymous investors withdraw support. Stock plummets. The irony was painful. Those anonymous investors were me. Without the quiet lifeline I had provided for years, Victoria's company was suddenly exposed, her house of cards tumbling for all of Boston to see. I thought of the employees, the ones I had fought so hard to protect. That guilt gnawed at me more than her humiliation ever had. I called Michael Reed, my longtime business partner, to talk it through. "They'll land on their feet," he assured me. "Most of them are talented. Firms in New York and Boston are already reaching out to scoop them up." Still, I couldn't shake the memory of Victoria sneering at me across Dad's dinner table, mocking my pathetic little desk job, while I quietly funneled money into her firm to keep their jobs alive. Now the truth was public. It wasn't just her career unraveling. Margaret, our neighbor, stopped me one evening outside Dad's house when I dropped off groceries. "Emily," she said softly, "I had no idea. All these years, you were the one holding things together. We should have seen it." Her words startled me. People were starting to look at me differently. Not as the quiet, invisible sister who lived a small life, but as the steady force I had always been. Inside, Dad sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "Your mother would be proud," he said, his eyes glistening. "You remind me of her. Quiet strength, steady heart." Hearing him say that broke something loose in me. For so long, I had carried the weight of being overlooked, unseen. Now, for the first time, I felt seen. Meanwhile, Victoria was spiraling. A mutual contact told me she and Andrew had been arguing non-stop in their luxury New York condo. Andrew, the man who had laughed loudest when she humiliated me, had reportedly started distancing himself as the scandal deepened. Rumors swirled that he was already courting new partners to salvage his own reputation. I wasn't surprised. He had always struck me as someone who thrived on appearances. And now, with Victoria's glittering facade crumbling, she had nothing left to offer him. Part of me felt pity. But another part, the stronger part, remembered her words. "Your place is on the floor." She was learning what it felt like to be pushed down. Michael called again a few days later, his voice buzzing with excitement. "Emily, you need to see this," he said, emailing me a link. It was an article in the Boston Herald, headlined, "Behind the Scenes Hero, Emily Dawson's Investments Saved Hundreds of Jobs." My throat tightened as I read it. The piece detailed how anonymous investors had propped up failing firms during market crashes and named me as one of them, thanks to documents Michael had shared. It wasn't sensational. It was measured, respectful, but it was enough to change how people viewed me. My inbox flooded with messages. Old colleagues, former classmates, even strangers wrote things like, "Thank you for what you did. You're an inspiration. Wish I'd had your courage." For years, I had hidden in Victoria's shadow, letting her dominate the spotlight. Now, I wasn't just stepping into the light, I was being invited into it. Victoria, of course, didn't take it well. She called one night, her voice raw, jagged. "Did you enjoy it?" she spat. "Watching me lose everything? Watching the world laugh while they praise you?" I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "I didn't do this to you, Victoria. You did it to yourself. Your pride built the trap. I just stopped saving you from it." She sobbed, then hissed, "I'll never forgive you." The line went dead. For a moment, I just stared at the phone in my hand, the silence heavy. But instead of guilt, I felt clarity. I wasn't responsible for her forgiveness. I was responsible for my own peace. The weeks that followed only widened the distance between us. Dad called often, his voice filled with pride. "You're stronger than both of us combined," he told me one evening. Michael and I began planning new projects, this time not in secret. We set up a foundation to support small businesses in Boston, ensuring their employees wouldn't suffer the same way Victoria's had. At one of our first meetings, a young woman approached me, her voice trembling. "Miss Dawson, you probably don't remember me, but I worked at my first firm because of your investments. You saved my family." Her words left me breathless. All those years of being unseen, suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. One night, as I walked through Boston Common, the city lights reflecting on the frozen pond, I realized something profound. Victoria's cruelty had once defined me. Her voice had lived rent-free in my head, dictating how small I felt. But now, her downfall wasn't my triumph. It was just her consequence. My triumph was this: standing tall, choosing dignity, and knowing that my place was never on the floor. It was here, in the light, in my own strength, in the life I was building for myself. And no one, not even my sister, could take that away again. The first snowfall of winter blanketed Boston in white, the kind that muffled the city's usual chaos and made everything feel softer. I stood by my apartment window, watching flakes swirl against the glow of street lamps, and realized how different life felt now. For years, I had lived in the shadow of my sister's success, dimming myself so she could shine brighter. But not anymore. Since the collapse of her firm, my days had been filled with a new kind of work that actually mattered to me. Michael and I had launched the Dawson Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping small businesses weather financial storms. We funded training programs, emergency grants, and mentorship opportunities. My calendar, once quiet, was now brimming with meetings, phone calls, and community projects. And yet, despite the busyness, I had never felt more at peace. One Saturday morning, Dad stopped by with a tin of his famous oatmeal cookies, the ones Mom used to make before she passed. We sat at my kitchen table, the smell of cinnamon filling the air, as he reached across to take my hand. "You know, Emily," he said, his voice warm, "your mother always told me you'd be the steady one. Victoria was the fire, but you were the anchor. I see that now." Tears pricked my eyes. All I had ever wanted was for him to see me, not as the quiet daughter, not as the background, but as myself. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered. "That means everything." He smiled. "I'm proud of you, Em. Truly proud." It was the affirmation I'd been waiting for my whole life. But the storm with Victoria wasn't entirely over. One evening, she showed up at Dad's house while I was dropping off groceries. Her once perfect hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled. Andrew wasn't with her. I had heard he'd finally left, retreating to New York to salvage his own career. She stood in the doorway, her eyes red. "Emily," she said softly, almost like a plea. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, but Dad gave me a gentle nod. We sat in the living room, the same space where she had once pushed me down in front of our entire family. Now she looked smaller, deflated, her confidence stripped away. "I lost everything," she whispered. "The firm, Andrew, my reputation. And I know I treated you horribly." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw not the ruthless sister who had mocked me, but a broken woman grappling with the weight of her choices. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued, her hands trembling. "But I need you to know. I was jealous. Always. You had Dad's love, Mom's gentleness. I tried to outshine you, but I couldn't." The confession hit me harder than her cruelty ever had. For years, I thought her disdain came from superiority. In truth, it came from insecurity. I took a deep breath. "Victoria," I said carefully, "you pushed me down and told me my place was on the floor. But you were wrong. My place has always been standing tall, even when no one noticed. I can't forget what you did, but I also won't let it define me anymore." She lowered her head, silent. I hope you find a way to rebuild your life, I added, my voice steady. But you'll have to do it without tearing me down. For once, she didn't argue. She just nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. Weeks later, as Boston thawed into early spring, I found myself standing on stage at a local business conference, the Dawson Foundation's logo glowing behind me. The room was packed with entrepreneurs, students, and community leaders. I told them my story. Not all the messy details, but enough. About being overlooked, about choosing humility, about the cost of silence and the power of finally standing up. Your worth, I said, scanning the crowd, isn't defined by the loudest voice in the room. It's defined by the choices you make when no one's watching. Don't let anyone tell you your place is on the floor. Your place is wherever you decide to stand. The applause that followed was thunderous, but it wasn't about me. It was about the message. That night, walking home through the Boston Common, I thought of Mom. I could almost hear her laughter in the rustle of the trees, her voice reminding me that kindness and strength could coexist. Victoria's downfall wasn't my triumph. My triumph was learning that dignity was louder than cruelty, that family doesn't give someone the right to break you, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step out of the shadows and into your own light. As the city skyline sparkled against the night sky, I felt lighter than ever before. For the first time, I wasn't looking down at the floor. I was looking ahead,